and welcome to another video. I'm Random, and today I'm going to be reading the fanfiction Alternate Perspectives from the Fallen Star series, written by Boxmaker. This is a Hermitcraft SMP fanfiction with a rating of mature, and the creator chose not to use any archive warnings, though personally I'd put in graphic depictions of violence for a few scenes. The category for this fic is General, and the featured characters are Etho-slab, Vintage Beef, BOO, DogM77, Good Times with Scar, Cubfan135, Iscal85, and other original characters. There are no romantic relationships, but the featured platonic relationships are Etho-slab and Vintage Beef, BOO, Etho-slab and Vintage Beef, Cubfan135, and Good Times with Scar. The additional tags are superpowers, alternate universe superheroes/superpowers, injury, blood and injury, hijinks and shenanigans, drinking, heist, hurt comfort, non-consensual body modification, Etho-centric, oops, I gave him trauma, kidnapping, medical torture, needles. Don't worry, he'll be mostly okay in the long run. These tags make it seem dark, but I promise this is lighthearted. The summary is in the description, and now on to the story. Chapter 5. A phone call and a proposition. Etho woke up much later than he intended, so he was lucky it was the weekend. They hadn't made any further discoveries the previous night, and Beef had gone out late with some friends. Beef invited him to come along, but Etho claimed he was too tired. He had been tired, and his shoulder still hurt, but he spent the night in a fitful sleep, thinking about his newfound abilities. He had yet to figure out how to switch his vision manually, and at this point he was losing hope. Etho eyed the business card that he had set on his desk. He felt an urge to pick up his phone and call Scar's number, only resisting because he knew that it would be an incredibly stupid idea. He didn't have any interest in working for Scar, and he doubted Scar would be amazed at the skill set his powers provided. Light was pouring in through the blinds of his bedroom, so he relocated to the kitchen and began making a cup of coffee. Beef stumbled in a few moments later, bleary-eyed and still wearing the clothes he went out in the night before. He smelled like cheap liquor. Etho sighed. This was going to be a long morning. Etho handed Beef a cup of coffee, then coaxed him into the shower. While he waited for Beef, he sat on the couch, idly scrolling through articles and blogs about beacons. He didn't learn much of anything new, just that he should talk to a doctor to discuss lifestyle changes regarding his powers, and that they could help him if his powers ever got out of control. It was nothing he didn't already know, and he wasn't concerned about his power being dangerous. The worst thing that could happen was that it would cause him to trip and fall, which was how he got into this mess in the first place. A small part of Etho was still in disbelief. Beacons were rare, and he was still reeling from the fact that he had become one at all. It wasn't real, something that people fantasized and dreamed about, but never actually attained. Nonetheless, here he was, shitty superpower and all. Etho collected Scar's business card from his room. The corner was slightly bent from being in his pocket. On autopilot, he opened his phone and was halfway through typing the number in before he realized what he was doing. Scar's voice from last night echoed through his thoughts. "Give me a call when you're ready." Etho didn't feel ready, but he felt strangely compelled to do so. He slipped the card back into his pocket and told himself he would call Scar later. A few minutes after that, Beef ambled into the living room, looking much more awake than he was previously. Etho wordlessly handed him the bottle of painkillers, which was running low. Thankfully, his shoulder was starting to feel better. "So," Beef began as he dug into a box of dry cereal. "Now what? We know you're a beacon, we know your power, you just need to figure out how to do it on command." He counted his fingers as he spoke. Etho hummed. "I think we should call Scar," he said abruptly. That wasn't exactly the way he wanted to start his conversation. Etho frowned. You think we should call Scar? Have you lost your mind? Etho didn't really know how to respond. He didn't really want to call Scar, he just felt a deep urge to do so and wasn't sure how to convey that to Beef without sounding like he had lost his mind. He told us to. Oh yes, he told us to, so of course we should call him. Yeah, Etho agreed, fishing out his phone. No. Beef shook his head vigorously. Whatever he wants from you, it cannot be good. He might be able to help. If he really is a beacon, he must have some experience with this. Maybe he can help me figure out how to control my power. Maybe, but remember last night? He said he had a job for someone with your skill set, and I'm guessing that's not a simple 9-to-5 office job. B-dubs works for him. How bad can it be? He wasn't sure why he was pushing so hard, but a small piece of his mind was screaming at him to call Scar. The more reasonable part of his mind held him back from doing so. Why do you want to call Scar so bad? Etho frowned, hands shaking slightly. Give me a call when you're ready. I don't want to. I just feel like I have to. What? He told me to. That doesn't mean you have to. Etho took a deep breath and handed Beef his phone, so he wouldn't be tempted. Give me a call when you're ready. Scar's voice echoed through his mind. I think Scar did something to me, because I really want to call him. What do you mean? You think he used his beacon powers or something? Can he do that? I don't know. Etho eyed his phone in Beef's hand with a glimmer in his eyes. Can I have my phone back? Beef's eyes narrowed. Why? No reason. Beef rolled his eyes and slipped Etho's phone into his pocket. You're not messing with me or anything. Etho shook his head. He didn't think he was. He was just itching to call Scar. He did not want to call Scar. Alright, so let me get this straight. You feel that you need to call Scar, but you don't want to call Scar. Etho nodded. I can hear his voice. Okay, let's say in theory we call Scar. Then what? Etho thought for a moment. He had no interest in working for Scar. He was content with his current situation as a computer science student. He was interested in whatever Scar's power was and any help he could offer Etho in controlling his own. Either way, it would be nice to talk to someone who was in the same situation as him, and Scar was the only other beacon he knew of. Well, outside from the vigilantes that appeared on TV from time to time. I'll tell him I'm not interested in whatever job he wants me to do, but I guess I can get him to help me with figuring out how to control my powers? Plus, calling him might make me stop wanting to call him. I guess. This just seems like a terrible idea. I know. Etho's hands were still shaking. After a moment, Beef tossed him his phone back. Put him on speaker. Etho grinned and typed in the number, which he had practically memorized at that point. The phone only rang for a few seconds before a cheery voice sounded from the other end. Hello, Scar here. What can I do for you? Hello, Etho said firmly as Beef waved for him to continue. We spoke last night. I'm not sure if you remember. Scar chuckled. But of course, I wasn't expecting your call quite so soon. Hello, Etho. Well, I wasn't planning on calling you at all, but here I am anyways. I'm sure you know nothing about that. Beef raised his eyebrows, and Etho realized he sounded a bit harsher than he intended to. Also, how the fuck do you know my name? Beef mouthed something at him and made a grab for the phone, but Etho grabbed it and rolled it out of the way, covering the speaker with his hand and whispering that he had it under control. Scar just laughed again. Well, I'm sorry about that, truly, but I wanted to ensure that we would speak again. And your name? That was easy. Your buddy B-Dubs informed me. Beef mouthed something along the lines of, "You two are friends?" To which Etho responded by vigorously shaking his head and mouthing, "No," back. "What do you want then?" Etho retorted, and Beef gave him a withering look. So Etho tacked on a "sir" at the end of the statement, just to sound a bit more polite. "Well, I wanted to have a conversation with you, like to like, if you know what I mean. Of course, there's some sensitive information involved, so probably best not to do this over the phone." "You're a beacon," Etho said bluntly. He was tired of dancing around the point. Scar didn't make a sound, but Etho swore he could hear him grinning. "If you wish to be so direct, then yes, I am. And so are you." Beef nodded as Scar confirmed their theory. He was indeed a beacon and knew Etho was one as well. Etho frowned. "Let's say I was a beacon. How would you know that?" "Well, that would be a conversation we could have if you came to talk to me in person. You're curious about me, and I understand, but I am just as curious about you." Beef was watching him warily. "And if I refused?" "Refuse? Oh, I think it would be silly to turn down such a marvelous offer. I could come to you, but the 7th floor is just so high up." Etho's eyes snapped up to meet Beef's panicked expression. Scar knew where they lived. Well, he knew enough to know that they lived on the 7th floor, but if he already knew that much, he could probably get the rest of the information just as easily. "Listen, I'll make this easy for you. You can come visit me today at the city hall, and we can continue this chat then and there." Beef's eyes widened as he shook his head and mouthed, "No." Etho's thoughts were a racing mess. He didn't think Scar was going to escalate the situation the way he threatened, but there was no way he could be certain. He was also deeply curious, and he wanted to figure out what Scar wanted, even if he wanted nothing to do with it. He locked eyes with Beef, who was silently begging him to refuse. "I'll see you later today," Etho said, and hung up the call. Beef face-palmed and groaned, breaking the otherwise silent room. "I get why you did it, but why?" He doesn't really like to take no for an answer, does he? I need to figure this out. I want to know what he wants with me, and I want to figure out how to get these powers under control. First is a phone call, now you're meeting the guy. He's going to pull you into this one way or another. Etho shook his head. "I won't accept the job, Beef. We're just gonna have a quick chat. I'll get him to help me sort out my powers, and then I'll come straight back here." "I'm coming with you." No, he said again as Beef pouted at him. "If something happens, if I'm not back by dinner, then I don't know, something bad happened. He's tricky and I don't like it. He's going to make you agree to something stupid," Beef complained. "I won't let it come to that. I need you here so you can back me up. I'll call you if I need help or something." "Fine, but if he tries anything, I'll leave. I know. With that settled, Etho prepared to go meet the mayor. Etho fretted about every detail of the encounter he was about to have on the walk over. He headed in the direction of City Hall, and he only knew its location because the fair had been there last night. He then realized he had forgotten to comb his hair, and that he probably should have changed out of his cargo pants and t-shirt. At least the mask sat high enough on his face that it might obscure the dark circles under his eyes. The building was tall and imposing, built out of tan stone and shining granite. There were more people milling about than usual, still cleaning up from last night's festivities. He took the stairs two at a time, passing a lovely collection of potted plants that Beef would have drooled over. The wooden door was tall and imposing, and Etho briefly wondered if he should knock or not, before a voice behind him interrupted his train of thought. "Hey, Etho." It was B-Dubs, who had somehow managed to climb the stairs behind him without him noticing. He frowned. He was usually pretty good at hearing people creep up on him. He was usually the one scaring people from behind. "Oh, hey," he said nervously. He didn't know B-Dubs that well, but he was happy for the familiar face nonetheless. "I'm glad I caught you. Scar told me to bring you up if I saw you, and I was just out grabbing coffee. Yes," he said excitedly. "You don't have any coffee," Etho pointed out. B-Dubs opened the massive wooden door and let out a nervous laugh. "I drink it all, of course," he said loudly, then muttered, "Stupid, stupid," to himself, so quietly that Etho barely heard. He raised an eyebrow but didn't say anything. B-Dubs led him to a massive foyer with a vaulted ceiling. There was a large desk at the back of the room where a few people sat, presumably to direct people where they needed to go. He followed B-Dubs into the elevator, and then through hallways so complex that Etho swore they were moving in circles. He felt a bit out of place among people in crisp business suits and shining shoes, but felt a bit more comfortable next to B-Dubs, who was wearing a green hoodie with a moss-like texture. They stopped suddenly in front of an imposing door with a golden plaque beside it, which read, "Mayor's Office." B-Dubs rapped on the door and then pushed it open slightly, beckoning Etho in front of him. Etho complied, and B-Dubs shut the door behind him quickly with a loud thump. Left on his own, Etho gazed around the room until he locked eyes with Scar, who was sitting in his wheelchair behind the desk. Scar gave him a wide grin and beckoned him closer with a lofty wave. "Well, hello there. Please have a seat," he said, gesturing to the plush chair in front of his desk. Etho did so, taking a quick look around the office. It was lined with bookcases which held various trinkets and other odds and ends. A polished chunk of pitch-black rock glimmered in the light, catching his eye. Scar's desk was grand, made of dark polished wood and inlaid with brilliant white gemstones. His back was to a large balcony with glass doors adorned with red curtains. The entire place screamed wealth, and as a broke college student, Etho felt he was in over his head. It was probably best to be polite, although they might have been past that point already, given the things he said over the phone. "Now, thank you for coming in such short notice," Scar said, wide grin still across his face. He deftly collected 2 crystal wine glasses from somewhere beneath his desk and procured a bottle of expensive-looking red wine. He poured each of them a glass with practiced ease and handed one to Etho. His fingers were studded with diamond gems. "Thank you," Etho muttered. He watched warily as Scar took a sip. If he wanted to kill Etho, he probably had all the money and power to do so, but he wouldn't put it past Scar to simply poison him and be done with it. His mask was still firmly secured over his face, so he held the glass idly in his hands. If Scar was offended by Etho's behavior, he didn't show it. "Why am I here?" Etho asked, deciding to jump right into things. He was tired of vague answers and promises. "Cutting right to it, I see. You and I are both beacons. We've put that together. You see, I've taken a special interest in employing people like us, given their unique skill set." "Better have them work for you than against you," Etho summarized. Scar gave him a cool laugh and nodded appreciatively. "You do catch on quick. Beacons are rare, but there are more in this city than you might think. There are events happening. Trust me, the safest place for you to be is by my side." "Really?" Etho mused. "Beside the man who threatened me." Deep down, he was curious. What events was Scar talking about? He doubted Scar would give him a direct answer if he asked outright, though. "You're here, aren't you? I wouldn't have gone through with it, of course. I just needed to get your attention." He was lying. Etho was certain of it. The calm, collected demeanor and honeyed words were all covering an intelligent, witty man. "I'm not here because I want to work for you. You're a beacon. You can help me. I'm new to all of this, and I want to know what you know." Scar looked him up and down, keeping a stony expression. "You're new to all of this? Now that is interesting. I assume you had been a beacon for some time. When did your powers manifest?" "No, I'm not telling you anything until you give me some answers. You can start by telling me how you know I'm a beacon." Scar gave him a wide grin. "Now that hardly seems fair, me spilling all my secrets while you hold on to yours. How about this? You ask a question and I'll give an answer. Then we switch. An equal exchange. Deal?" Scar extended his hand across the table, offering it for Etho to shake. He racked his mind, trying to figure out how Scar could possibly be tricking him. "You have to answer truthfully," he said after a moment's pause. "As do you," Scar retorted cheerfully, and Etho shook his hand. "To answer your first question," Scar began, leaning back with a flourish, "part of my power allows me to tell if people are beacons or not." Etho nodded. He had suspected as much, but felt reassured now that Scar had confirmed his theory. But he was clearly keeping some details to himself. He was sure that being urged to call Scar that morning wasn't just his overreactive mind. There was some sort of outside force that pressured him to do so. "And now, I might ask the same of you. What are your powers?" Etho had expected the question, but he held back anyways. He didn't trust Scar one bit, and he certainly didn't trust him with such a sensitive secret. "This conversation isn't going to go very far if we can't be truthful with each other," Scar prompted after sensing Etho's hesitation. All right, it's a bit hard to explain, but have you ever played a third-person shooter game?" Scar raised an eyebrow and nodded. "My vision can switch into a third-person perspective, sort of like that." Scar rubbed his chin. "Now that is quite fascinating. How long ago did you gain this ability?" Etho opened his mouth to respond, but then realized that it was his turn to ask a question. "It's my turn," he said with a grin. "You asked if I have ever played a third-person shooter, and I said yes. It is very much my turn." Etho was glad his mask was covering most of his expression, so Scar couldn't see his mouth drop in a silent "oh" the moment the realization hit him. He cursed internally. He needed to be a lot more careful when he spoke. "Like 2 days ago," he muttered, avoiding Scar's piercing gaze. 2 days? Scar said in disbelief. My, I did catch you early, didn't I? "Now," he said, pausing for a brief moment to take a sip of wine, "you may ask your question." "What are your powers? All of them?" Etho demanded. Scar laughed. "I will admit I only have the one, but it isn't what you think it is. I have a way with words," he said with a wink. "I can be incredibly, undeniably convincing. Along with that, I can tell if people are beacons. They give off a sort of glow, you see." Etho nodded, though it didn't make much sense to him. These sounded like separate abilities to him as far as he was concerned. "I won't bore you with the details, but I got them at the same time, so they have to be part of the same power," Scar mused. Etho wasn't convinced. It sounded like Scar had 2 separate beacon abilities, but if Scar thought that they were one, he couldn't exactly argue. The urge he had felt this morning to call Scar made a lot more sense, given that Scar had commanded him to do so. "I see," Etho said finally. The fact that Scar could force him to do literally anything was concerning, to say the least. He didn't need Etho to agree to anything. He could just send him out to do any job that needed completing. He glanced behind him at the door which B-Dubs had firmly shut after he entered. "You don't have to worry," Scar reassured him. "Charming people tend to be bad for business. I'm not going to make you do anything you don't want to, for the most part," he said cheerfully. Etho eyed him warily. "That doesn't make me feel any better." "It shouldn't." Etho's mind burned with questions. Scar knew a lot more than he did about, well, everything. He wished his power was more useful, or that he could at least control it, not that it would help in a situation like this. "So, have you told anyone else that you're a beacon?" Scar asked. "My best friend," Etho confessed. "I assume that's who you were with in the alley last night?" Etho had almost forgotten that Scar and Beef had technically met. "Yeah," he said, then added, "He's also my roommate." Good. That's a secret I recommend you keep close. The fewer people that know, the better." "Why?" Etho asked, then quickly added, "Wait, no, don't answer that. That's not my next question." "I'll give this one to you free of charge," Scar said solemnly. "Beacons are not well loved. There are some who believe we shouldn't exist at all. Others who are power-hungry and will stop at nothing to try and claim our powers for themselves." The room fell very silent. That's what people do. They crave power and will stop at nothing to get it. Be careful. He met Etho's eyes. Whatever you do, be careful. Etho's eyes widened and he nodded quickly. "That does bring me to our next topic of conversation, but you may ask your final question first." Etho thought for a moment. He had more than one question and knew that some of them would probably leave him even more confused. He debated asking Scar what incident caused him to gain his powers, but he eyed the wicked scars across his face and neck and thought better of it. Asking was probably impolite anyways. He could ask about the origins of beacon powers or how to control his own, but something was telling him that Scar's answers weren't going to be very satisfactory. "I'm going to save my question," he announced. "You owe me the truth to one question I ask in the future." Scar grinned at him. "Well, I've never had someone save a question before." "Very well, I owe you one truth." Etho leaned back in his chair, setting down his glass of undrunk wine. "That concludes our little game, I suppose. I enjoyed, but it does take a terribly long time to learn just a few simple things. Now, onto the main reason that I brought you here." "I'm not interested in whatever job you have to offer me." Scar gave him a sharp look. "You don't even know what it is yet. How about you listen first and then make your judgments?" "Fine, but you have to help me, regardless of whether or not I agree to your job." "Help you with what?" Etho twiddled his thumbs nervously. "My power," he said carefully. "Our powers are quite different, but I'm sure I could offer you some guidance. I can't control it," Etho cut in quickly. "It switches randomly and I can't figure out how to control it." He was glad Scar couldn't see how red his face had gotten. That's typical for many beacons when they've just undergone the switch, myself included." Etho perked up a bit at that. He thought he was the only one struggling. "How did you figure it out?" "Time, mostly. Among other things." "What other things?" "Well, I'll tell you after I explain the job I have for you." Etho sighed but gestured for him to continue. Scar seemed set on giving him the details so he would listen and then get his help or leave. I'm sure you're familiar with Alpha Technologies. Etho nodded. Good. Are you familiar with Concorp? Yeah, they're both companies. They were both companies with headquarters in the city. He was pretty sure they dealt in science, robotics, that sort of thing. Scar laughed like he knew something that Etho didn't. Well, I used to work there, you know. My best friend and I were the CEOs of the company for a while. Etho hadn't known that. He couldn't imagine Scar as the head of some uptight tech company, but he gathered Scar could probably make himself fit into whatever environment he needed to. The expensive belongings and lavish office suddenly made a lot of sense. Between his time as CEO and the mayor, Scar probably had enough money to retire on his own private island. I'm the mayor now, and Cub is the sole CEO of Concorp. We're still best friends, of course. As you can imagine, two tech companies in the same city means competition. Don't they do different things, though? Etho asked. Scar grinned. Why, yes, they do. Concorp specializes in robotics, drones, prosthetics, and all sorts of other things. AlphaTech does a lot of research in many areas, including beacons. Etho nodded. The details sounded vaguely familiar, and he remembered various news highlights on the Vigilante 77 stealing expensive equipment from AlphaTech, although he hadn't seen any robberies in the news recently. Here's our problem. AlphaTech has hired an assassin to kill Cub. Etho's eyes widened. What the fuck? He blurted out without thinking. Sorry, why would they do that? Scar gave him an amused look. Well, competition, my friend. Cut off the head of the beast, and the rest shall fall quickly. I guess, but that seems a little bit extreme, don't you think? Wait, how do you know all this? I'm the mayor, Scar said with a wave of his hands. I know things. Etho frowned, thinking Scar ought to be a bit more concerned that someone had just sent a hitman after his best friend, and the vague answer did nothing to reassure him. Does this happen often? Oh, all the time. Cub and I have agreed to... Cub knows? Well, of course Cub knows. Tell me, if you found out someone had been hired to kill your best friend, what's the first thing you do? Call the cops? No, you call your best friend and tell them, because that's what friends are for. Haha, silly me. Anyways, Cub and I have agreed this needs to be handled in a delicate manner. You see, AlphaTech hasn't hired just any old assassin. They've hired an old friend of ours. His name is Iskal. You're friends with an assassin? Etho asked. It was more surprising than it should have been, given all he had learned about Scar. Scar made a so-so motion with his hand. Well, we used to know each other pretty well, but we haven't spoken in a while. Iskal is the best assassin I know. He's ruthless. The implication that Scar knew multiple assassins did not sit well with Etho. What's your plan? Well, that's simple. If there's one thing I know about Iskal is that he goes where the money is. All we need to do is pay him a lavish sum and he'll leave Cub alone. Probably. Probably? He's an old friend. I'll talk him into it. He likes Cub anyways. I'm sure he's looking for any old excuse not to kill him. If he's Cub's friend, why did he agree to killing him in the first place? Scar waved his hand in a vague manner. Like I said, he goes where the money is, and making enemies with AlphaTech shouldn't be high on anyone's to-do list. And when he takes your offer instead of killing Cub? Scar shrugged nonchalantly. They're expecting it. Similar things have happened before. If Iskal really has to, he can make up something about too much risk and be on his way. They'll be angry, but mostly at us rather than him. It made a little sense to Etho, but he gave a knowing nod. He was shaken by just how casual Scar was being about the entire situation. There was someone coming to kill his friend. Iskall could be stabbing Cub right now, and they would have no idea. That was a chilling thought. "Where's Iskall right now?" Etho asked nervously. "Presumably at his apartment, maybe on some other job. I'm not really sure what he gets up to in his spare time." "Cub is safe for now. Iskall likes to do a bit of preliminary research before he acts, and Cub isn't exactly an easy target to get to. I also know that he's going to be out of town next weekend on a job, so I doubt he would spread himself thin and work on two at the same time." "All right," Etho said, but didn't feel any more relaxed. His palms were sweating, and it was getting incredibly hot with his mask on. "I'm not really seeing why you need my help with all this," he said. "Scar already said he planned to pay off Iskall so he wouldn't be a problem, unless he wanted to make sure all loose ends got tied up." "Do you want me to kill Iskall?" Etho blurted out. Scar snorted, doubling over in laughter. "Kill him? No, that's very funny though. He would break you apart like a twig." Etho rolled his eyes as Scar dramatically wiped the tears from his eyes. "What do you want then?" "Right. Iskall likes to do his research, and Alpha Technologies obviously wants him to succeed. I'm guessing they've given him all sorts of top-secret files about their research. Now, what I'm about to tell you can't leave this room. Do you understand?" Scar asked seriously, a large contrast from his previously cheerful demeanor. "Alpha Tech is... They aren't a good company, ethics-wise. They've gathered research, sure, but their methods are unappealing, and I don't believe they have the best intentions for beacons, despite what they may say." Scar's voice had gone quiet, like he was afraid someone might be listening in. "Are you sure? I thought their research was centered around trying to figure out where beacon powers came from and helping beacons figure out how to harness their abilities." "Well, that's what they say, and while some of it may be true, I have reason to believe that their intentions are not benevolent. Remember what I said about people and greed." That was terribly cryptic. Either Scar liked to speak in riddles, or there were things he didn't want Etho knowing. It was probably a bit of both. "How do you know all of this?" "I can't tell you, not yet at least. You already know too much, given we've known each other less than a day." "Why me? You could have picked anyone off the street." Scar gave him a strained smile. "Well, 2 reasons, really. The first is that I am selfish. Beacons fascinate me, and I'm always looking to add a new talent to my arsenal. The second reason is that if I didn't grab you, Alpha Tech would have, and I'm not going to let them hurt anyone else in my city." Etho's throat suddenly felt very dry. "They kidnap people?" "Beacons mostly, but yes, that I know for certain." Etho shivered despite the heat. He hadn't considered the consequences of his new abilities outside of what he could do with them. "You'll be safe now that you're with me. They won't dare touch you because they know Cub and I will come after them if they do." Etho barely managed to choke out the next words. "Do they know about me, that I'm a beacon?" Scar gave him a solemn look. "If they don't know already, then they will very soon." "How?" "That is one of the many questions I wish I could answer. If I could, I believe I would have the proof I needed to put their company out of business. That's what all this is for. I need proof, real, solid proof of Alpha Tech's crimes." "I thought you said you have proof." "Nothing solid enough to hold in a courtroom, and some things, well, Some things were obtained a little less than legally. I'm sure you understand. Etho nodded numbly. Given the important nature of Iskal's mission, I have strong reason to believe they've given him top-secret documents regarding beacons. Those documents could contain the proof we need to put a stop to them. Scar polished off his glass of wine with a large gulp. Etho sat on the table, untouched. You need someone to steal those documents, Etho said, finally putting the pieces together. I do. This is a once-in-a-lifetime chance. It's nearly impossible to break into Alpha Tech and get deep enough to steal their research, but in Iskal's hands, it'll be much easier. Etho smiled a bit at that. They probably shouldn't have given him those files then. Probably not, although I suspect they didn't think I'd find out. Who's to say? Etho leaned back in his chair. This was insane. Insane. Scar wanted him to break into the home of an assassin and steal a bunch of classified documents while risking his own life and putting himself in the crosshairs of a powerful research organization that apparently had the balls to kidnap him off the street. There was one final detail that was still bugging him. Why did they give him the files anyways? He doesn't need to know about Beacon. It's not like Cub's a... Oh. Is Cub a beacon? Scar rubbed his forehead. I figured you'd put two and two together. Yes, Cub is a beacon. What can he do? Not telling. I'm sworn to secrecy. He's going to kill me even though you put the pieces together on your own. Scar stretched his arms over his head. So, now you know everything. Well, you know enough about the job at least. Now you can see why this is so important. Etho huffed. This is insane. This is just... Why me? Scar looked at him pensively. I felt the same way once. I never asked for powers. I never asked for any of this. Yeah, but at least your powers are actually useful. What can I do? See around corners? I can't even control it. Scar shook his head. It's not all it's cracked up to be, being able to talk someone into anything. It tends to backfire spectacularly. And I've done things that I regret. For the first time, Etho watched Scar's cheery, suave demeanor cracked for just a moment. I can't help you. I'm not a hero or anything. I can't just break into Iskal's apartment. Like you said, he'd break me like a stick. He wouldn't be home when you break in, if that makes you feel any better. Like I said, he is going to be away next weekend, so the place would be empty. All you have to do is get in and get out. Why doesn't someone else do it, like you or Cub or literally anyone besides me? Iskal knows both Cub and I. We can't risk him finding out who took the documents. He'll figure it out eventually, but we can buy ourselves a little bit of time. And I'm pretty sure Cub and I are still banned from his apartment building anyways. Banned? Scar waved his hands. A story for later. While I have no doubt Alpha Tech has been made aware of your existence, I doubt you'll be their first suspect for stolen documents. Who haven't worked for me in the past, so even if they pin the blame on you, they won't be able to make any sort of public statement about it that pins the blame on me. Would they find out? Oh, I have no doubt they'll figure it out. They'll know Cub and I hired you to do it, but it's not anything they can legally prove, unless they want to explain their almost certainly illegal methods of information gathering. By that time, we'll have the files anyway, so they wouldn't dare lift a finger against us. Etho had never been good with politics, and he was struggling to keep track of everyone's position in the situation. Even so, he didn't like the sound of it one bit. If he agreed to this, he would essentially be painting a bright target on his back. Now you see why it's crucial we have someone new do this, so it can't be traced back to me and Cub. Etho shook his head. I can't. Really, I wish I could help because these guys sound like real assholes, but I can't put myself into the crossfire like that. Scar gave him a cool look and shook his head softly. Don't you see? You're already in the crossfire. You're a beacon. Your life has changed, whether you like it or not. Scar's words weighed heavily on Etho, but he didn't reply, avoiding Scar's gaze. I'll pay well, of course. Etho huffed but raised an eyebrow in interest. No amount of money could get him to agree to this plan, but he was curious what Scar, current mayor and former CEO, would offer him. You have college loans, I'm assuming? Etho's eyes widened, and Scar snapped his fingers. I could make those go away. Etho gaped at him, again glad that he was still wearing his mask. You'd pay off my college loans? Scar nonchalantly waved a hand. Oh, of course. For such an important job, I think that's fitting. Holy shit. He mentally retracted his previous statement. There was an amount of money that could get him to consider the job, but the risks that were involved, he wasn't sure if it was worth it. He couldn't go back to school if he was dead. You can have time to think about it, of course, but I'd like to know soon. We have a week until Iskall goes away, and I need to have some plan to put into action. Should you accept the job, we would, of course, go into further detail. Etho nodded mutely. He could think about this for a year and still not be able to come up with a definitive answer. 24 hours seems like a reasonable amount of time for you to make up your decision, Scar offered. Anything else you need to know? Etho could think of about 100 different questions to ask. Instead, he shook his head and rose to his feet shakily. I'll let you know tomorrow. I have your number. Scar wheeled himself around the desk so he was next to Etho. I urge you to reconsider all angles when you make this choice, he said seriously, and I look forward to your response. He offered Etho his hand, and Etho shook it. Thank you, Etho replied. He didn't want to sound ungrateful, despite the fact that Scar had just dumped a world of concerning information over him. Be careful, Scar warned, and Etho swore his eyes flickered blue just for a second. Etho nodded curtly, then turned around and left through the imposing wooden door. I love how Box writes Scar. I love Scar. I love how Box writes him. He wants so badly to be evil and a villain, but the 7th floor is just so high up. But he wants to do a good thing ultimately, he wants to stop Alpha Tech, but he loves the villain vibes. Anyways. Plots. I don't know what to say because I don't want to give spoilers. Alpha Tech is not a good company. That's all that I'm saying. We don't like them. Beatup's a horrible liar. I went out to buy coffee, yes, but I drank all of it. I didn't get any for Scar, who I'm working for, as an internship thing. I didn't get any for him, nope, just for myself. Yep. That's what I did. I wasn't waiting for you. I wasn't hiding. I'm not gonna explain that. I'm not explaining that. Anyways, to the credits. Most of the sound effects used in this video were not mine. A few of them were, most of them weren't. The fan art also isn't mine. And the story was not written by me. You can find the story in an archive of our own. Proper links and credits for all of those are down in the description for those on YouTube. For those that are they're in the same page, you already saw it probably. Leave a like and a comment and subscribe. It helps. Tell me what you thought. Tell me if you don't like me rambling at the end of these. I don't know if people like to hear me ramble. I'll see you all in the next chapter. Bye-bye.